So, let me give you a few of the tools to put in your tool belt. What is cultural anthropology? Has anyone heard of cultural anthropology, taken the class? Know what the definition is? Okay. It's a study of human societies based on ethnographic, social, and linguistic data. What is ethnography? It's the process of recording and interpreting another person's way of life. It's originally anthropology was a bit more, how shall I put this? A way of classifying more so than it is today. Now it's more of a way of understanding. Okay, stepping into those other people's shoes. So, first tool, narrative storytelling. If you're going to get some information out of people, a buddy, for example, and you want to know what is it that they value the most? What's important to them? What do they need? Are you going to go up and ask them, hey, what do you value? What do you need? Well, you can. Nobody says you can't do that. But what are you going to achieve by asking them what they value or what they need? You're not going to get the correct answer. It's going to depend on the way in which you phrase the question. It's going to depend on who's listening. It's going to depend on who you are, especially if I'm in a different community, say in Africa, in Zambia, and I'm asking them, they're going to think, well, she probably has a lot of money. So my answer is going to be, I need a new car. I need a digital camera. I need this. I need that. Obviously, it's the context, because I've asked them directly what they need. Narrative storytelling is a way to determine, in a roundabout way, what somebody values and what they need. For example, in Honduras, and probably, well, in El Salvador is where I did some previous Engineers Without Borders work. And in El Salvador, they had very, very harsh civil wars. And if a community has been through civil war and guerrilla warfare, you will not be able at all to really understand where they're coming from unless you've heard their stories of that guerrilla warfare. And those stories are gonna help you discover what they need. The other concept that anthropologists use is being a participant observer. And the reason they do that is because if you are participating in the community, this is in our community in Zambia, when you're participating with the culture, you're understanding their way of life a lot more. It's helping you get into their worldview, right? I've tried to carry water on my head. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. But that now it helps me understand the challenges that a lot of the women and children face when they carry water great distances on their head or carry it on their back. Finally, there's the anthropological lens. It's just a way of perceiving the world. And for a little example of that, when I was back in high school, I volunteered in a high school, or sorry, in an elementary school, and there was a little girl from Sudan, Gudatu. And Gudatu had just moved to the United States, and she knew no English whatsoever. She was about 6 years old. And so they partnered me with her. I didn't know her language, obviously. But they partnered me with her to kind of help walk her around, do some flashcards of English words with her. And I was struck so much with how she just was perceiving everything around her. She sat up straight in class. The American students were, of course, throwing things at each other, playing around, distracted. And she was just listening. She didn't understand what the teacher was saying, and she was watching, observing every move of all of her classmates, of the teacher, the way that they were interplaying. She had on an anthropological lens. Children have achieved this, and adults have much more trouble because we are already stuck in our ways. So that's a skill that can be very difficult to do, and it's really just stepping outside of yourself and observing everything else that's around you. So what have you done? What have you achieved? Once you've used all these tools, here's kind of what it looks like. There's you, and there's a community member. You ask them a question. How was your day? What was your favorite toy growing up? How many children do you have? What are your children? Where do they go to school? What did they learn in school? They'll give you a direct response. So you've stimulated them with the question, and they'll give you an emotional response. Now you're asking them life stories. You're asking about their narrative. Where did they come from? What was it like living through this time? Have there been any floods, etc.? Any sort of thing, any sort of question that you would have about their life. Their visions, family, pain they have, celebrations, their religion, customs. And you're you're then observing their narrative. You're not just getting the direct response. You're observing what they're telling you, and you're journaling all the time. Journaling. And believe me, although you don't realize that you're incorporating that information into your other subsequent decision making, you will. So that's how you see their values and their worldview, or come to understand it. And one more thing I want to note right now is that although I'm talking a lot about Engineers Without Borders and developing communities, the social factor of engineering is important in all industries. How else do you suppose the iPhone could ever be successful? They had to Steve Jobs and his teams needed to really get under the skin of the users. These are engineers who they know how to break into computers and program all of their own programs and games and do what the technology can do. They can program it all. But they really wanted to know, what does the end user want? What do the people want? And so social factors of engineering are always present. Here's another visual to demonstrate what you've done. You've got you and the other. So first, you've got your direct questions and responses. You're still very different. They come from a different place, right? Well, then you start going to the second level of some inquiry and opinions. What do they think about this? What do they think about the government? What do you think about your government? What's your life like in the United States? Finally, when you get down to level 3, you understand their values, you'll realize how much we're all the same. And you really drill down to the shared values that we all share. So I don't know if you've read Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you haven't, I highly recommend that you do. And the 8th habit, all of those C's to avoid. I'm really bad at them. I'm a highly competitive person. Have to avoid doing that. And I judge, I criticize, I'm horrible. So anyway, Stephen Covey is a very good model to have up on your, well, I have a cubicle, obviously. It's on my cubicle wall. Things to avoid. And the 5th habit strikes me as especially important because you need to, even with my coworkers in my daily life, I have so much tendency to come up and say, hey, here's what we're doing, here's the plan, put it on their desk, ask for them to give me a response right away. I've not at all even asked them about their day. I haven't at all even asked them what they thought about this path forward, this project, or how I'm approaching the task, how I'm planning the work. And it's very off-putting, if I don't seek first to understand. I've gotten some feedback from colleagues, very blunt feedback, that I can come across as cruel and intimidating. And so this is the habit that I really need to work on, and it goes the same as when you're talking to the end user or affected people of your design or of your engineering project. So now I've given you a lot of the cloud stuff, the nebulous. Now you're thinking, oh God, now what? There's nothing, how am I supposed to implement any of this? Well, here are some nuts and bolts. You've probably learned decision matrices, or if you haven't yet, you will soon, if you do transportation engineering or anything where you've got different options. So across the top of these matrices, you've got your 3 options. You always need to do a no-build option as well. So option 1 might be chlorinator. Option 2 might be carbon filter, for a water system. Option 3 is do nothing. Their groundwater is good enough. And then down here you have your criteria, your selection criteria. And of course I just only put 3, the 3 pillars of sustainability: environmental, social, and economic. And I really do encourage you when you're doing these decision matrices to put environmental, social, and economic. Then you can add many more sub-criteria as well under environmental. So eco-diversity, emissions, for example, resource scarcity, making sure you're not messing up the topsoil. If you're doing any sort of agricultural project, oftentimes the topsoil needs to be regenerated. So anyway, environmental, social, economic. Social might be, for a large infrastructure project, user delays, so a lot of additional traffic that you're adding. Are there any knock-on effects? Are you throwing off their way of life? So social has plenty of sub-factors you can put in there. Anyway, then we have these 3 options, and you on your whole team, and I encourage you to involve the community as well during this phase, you go ahead and you put, say, from anywhere from 1 to 10, and give an option 1, 2, and 3 from scale from 1 to 10, how it positively impacts all of these criteria. You got to make sure your scale is consistent, otherwise you might accidentally be giving a 10, which is good in one hand, and then a 1, which is good on the other hand. So you got to make sure that if you're going for high numbers, high is good. Anyway, that was not meant to be taken in a different way. Then over here you've got your, the I is the importance factor. And you should be attaching importance factors to it, but so should the community members or the affected people who are involved in these charrettes. So then one thing I also encourage you to do, if possible, is for the main categories, you can do it in Excel such that these subcategories roll into this one major one, then you do 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So they all have equal importance, equal weighting. Otherwise, you're going to run into something where the economic factors are more important than the social or environmental. And these 2 examples are just to illustrate how a different solution can be chosen based on different importance factors.